First Sergeant's boots thudded heavily against the floor as he strode into the office, eyes like ice and a jaw set like granite. The 5 Marines hunched over a map barely registered his entrance. He paused, glancing down at his desk, and frowned. His ruler was missing. His hand brushed across the empty spot where the ruler should have been. 18 years of infantry, clear procedures, set standards, everything in its place. But here, in this wing support unit, chaos seemed to reign. Papers scattered across desks, Marines lounging rather than standing at attention, conversations that felt more civilian than military. The scar on his left shoulder, twinged, a phantom reminder of simpler times when his biggest concern was keeping his men alive through another patrol. Now he dealt with requisition forms, maintenance schedules and personnel issues that made his head spin, his fingers curled into a fist. Such a small thing, a missing ruler, but it represented everything that felt wrong here. In his infantry units, no one would dare touch an NCO's belongings without permission. Here, they treated his desk like a supply closet. The morning sun slanted through the blinds, casting prison bar shadows across his desk. He watched dust motes dance in the light, remembering the fine sand of Iraq that used to coat everything. Even that had made more sense than this assignment. His jaw clenched tighter as he observed the Marines at the table. Their uniforms weren't quite squared away, their bearing too relaxed, different from the razor-sharp discipline he'd known for nearly 2 decades. First Sergeant painfully frowned, feeling every one of his years in service weighing on his shoulders. The transition from infantry to support felt like learning a new language, one where all the familiar words meant something different. Without a word, he marched to the table, and his fist came down hard, rattling the pencils and scattering a few papers.
Who took my ruler?
Marines jumped back like they'd been shocked, their faces blanched, eyes wide. Except for one, Corporal Kimball, a petite female. She looked up with an easy grin, a chuckle bubbling up.
It was me, First Sergeant. Do you want it back?
The room went silent. The First Sergeant's eyes narrowed as he stared at her. For a second, confusion flickered across his face. He snatched the ruler from her hand without another word and returned to his desk. Later in his office, the First Sergeant called Corporal Kimball in. She stood at attention, the faintest hint of curiosity in her eyes.
Corporal, there have been only 2 females I have had to deal with in my life. My wife and my daughter. I've never worked with a female in my entire career. And now it appears I will need to learn how to deal with you.
Understood, First Sergeant.
Dismissed.
As she turned to leave, her eyes caught the wall of photos behind him. Faces of Marines stared back at her, frozen in time.
Gunny, what are those pictures in the First Sergeant's office?
Those are Marines he's lost in combat.
The weight of that revelation settled on her shoulders as she walked away. Sergeant Major Thorne found Corporal Kimball leaning against the wall near the armory, lost in thought, as she snapped to attention as he approached.
So what do you think of our new First Sergeant?
He's intense. Different from what we're used to.
Thorne chuckled, nodding.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. He just got transferred from an infantry unit. Word gets around about guys like him, strict as hell, runs a tight ship.
Kimball remembered the photos in First Sergeant's office, the faces of lost Marines looking back at her. She swallowed hard.
I can see why he is the way he is.
Yeah, those infantry units are a different breed. Discipline is everything there. But we're gearing up to be mobilized to Iraq ourselves.
Kimball nodded slowly, processing the weight of those words.
How do you feel about deploying with the First Sergeant?
She sighed, glancing back towards the main building where First Sergeant's office lay.
Those pictures of fallen Marines in his office says it all for me. Any man who cares that much about the fallen must be a good man.